Tom Fitton was in the room at the time. He was the president of Judicial Watch. Tom, we didn't hear any new details, really, no new evidence. So where are we this morning?
Well, you know, despite this big circus of a hearing, it didn't advance the ball in terms of providing, oh my gosh, he certainly did it, or anything that would suggest that you can't trust anything this woman said, you know, other than the fact she had no corroborating evidence and no one supported her. But of course, we knew that the day before the hearing, and we didn't have need a hearing to know what we now know today, which is why his case is, or his confirmation is going to go to a vote later today. Because nothing new happened yesterday other than the circus. And I'm glad the Republicans are shutting the circus down. I don't think they'd move to the committee vote if they didn't think they had the votes to move them out of committee and ultimately to confirmation. So despite the torture, and it was torture, and it was really unethical what the Senate Democrats put him through in league with their leftist allies, it looks like Judge Kavanaugh will be the next Supreme Court justice by the middle of next week.
Now, Tom, you were in the room. You know, we can sit here on the couch and talk about this, but we weren't actually in the room. What was it like to be in the room when Lindsey Graham made those statements?
Oh, it was high drama. I could see Senator Graham, even before that, was reacting quite strongly. You're sitting there, you could see him almost popping out of his chair in response to some of what was going on. And going back to the beginning of the hearing before Dr. Ford testified, guys, that tension in that room was incredible. And you could cut it with a knife. And everyone was paying very close attention to what she said. And then later in the day, Judge Kavanaugh came in and defended himself quite ably and went at the hearing, set the senators there from the Democratic side quite directly. And you don't necessarily get that from the cameras. But they were held to account. And I have to say, I thought the Democrats had the advantage, even through Judge Kavanaugh's opening testimony. It was dramatic, but the Democrats lost when they began opening their mouths, questioning him, because the veil was lifted. You could see they were dishonest.
FBI.
One of the worst things was having, I forget who was questioning him about the yearbook, but they had these giant posters of his yearbook, and you just saw the absurdity. And it
Senator
just
Whitehouse.
All the credibility that they thought they had just went out the door when you have this poor man's yearbook being raised as if it was a piece of evidence against us. It was absurd.
Tom, the whole thing was this. You want to believe Ford? Or you want to talk about Kavanaugh's authenticity? Well, if Ford wanted to keep her anonymity, that was thrown in the street against her will, if we're to believe what we hear, because Dianne Feinstein had it, held it, and suddenly it's out there. Why was it out there? Why was her name released? She could have been anonymous. We could have got to the bottom of this. In one-on-one sessions, they could have got these allegations out, but they didn't do it. So here's Senator Dianne Feinstein denying that she leaked the letter.
Mr. Chairman, let me be clear. I did not hide Dr. Ford's allegations. I did not leak her story. She asked me to hold it confidential, and I kept it confidential as she asked. She apparently was stalked by the press, felt that what happened, she was forced to come forward, and her greatest fear was realized. She's been harassed, she's had death threats, and she's had to flee her home.
But why was she stalked by the press? Because her name leaked out.
Through the Democratic side of the aisle there. So, you know, what I think came out yesterday was Senator Feinstein's corrupt operation, where they withheld the fact that they knew about these allegations while they were questioning Judge Kavanaugh, so they knew they had this here. They could have asked the FBI to do a quick interview weeks ago. And on top of that, Feinstein's staff is recommending her lawyers, further undermining her credibility to the detriment of the accuser. So the corruption of the Democratic side here was exposed. And, you know, we have to remember they were also pushing out these false allegations that came out subsequently against Judge Kavanaugh that were absurd on their face, and I'm not going to repeat them because they don't deserve repetition. This man has had his reputation dragged through the mud enough. Again, The Democrats lost yesterday, thankfully, not because anyone opposes them in a partisan way. It's because this process would have ruined the Senate if it was allowed to go through the way they wanted to go through, which is to raise allegations without evidence. This woman may believe what she said she believes, and you can believe her, and you can have sympathy for her. But it isn't enough to derail this man's nomination, destroy his reputation. And this is why it should have been held privately, because you could have evaluated her and said, you know what, we appreciate you believe that happened 35 years ago. There's not evidence here to derail his nomination. And in fact, we're not going to torture you by making you go through a public recitation of what happened here, or we're not going to torture him. Instead, both were abused, and the Senate owes Judge Kavanaugh an apology. The best apology would be confirm him as quickly as possible, though.
See what Jeff Flake does.
Let's see
Susan Collins and
what
Susan
the vote is this morning.
McCarthy.
All right. Tom, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Joining
Tom.
us from Judicial Watch.